The council chamber stretched for almost a mile in every direction. Thousands of representatives from hundreds of species filled the massive space. Captain Min-jun Park stood at the back of the human delegation, watching as Ambassador Hye-jin Lee approached the center platform. His dress uniform felt too tight. Something about this emergency session made his stomach twist with worry. "The council recognizes the human delegation," announced the speaker, a floating creature that looked like a jellyfish made of light. Its voice echoed through translation devices worn by every species present. Ambassador Lee bowed respectfully. She had served Earth for 20 years and had always believed in diplomatic solutions. "Thank you, honored council. Earth received your summons and came immediately to address your concerns." From the elevated command tier, Counselor Zekthor rose. He was an insectoid being, nearly 8 feet tall, with a hard shell that gleamed like polished metal. His 4 arms gestured sharply as he spoke. "Concerns? Your species has exceeded all acceptable boundaries. In the mere 50 years since contact, humans have established colonies on 73 worlds. You expand like a plague." Min-jun felt anger rise in his chest, but remained silent. He was military, not diplomatic. His job was to observe and report. Ambassador Lee kept her voice calm. "We have settled only uninhabited worlds in unclaimed space, as is permitted under galactic law. Every survey, every claim has been properly filed and approved by this very council. Laws written before we understood the threat you represent." Zekthor clicked his mandibles together, creating a sound like grinding metal. "Your history is soaked in blood, thousands of wars on your single planet, weapons designed for nothing but killing your own kind, and now you spread this violence across the stars." Another counselor stood, a being that resembled a walking tree. Her voice was gentle. "Surely we can discuss this reasonably. Humans have not shown aggression toward other species." "Not yet." Zekthor slammed one of his arms against his podium. "We have studied their nature. They are predators, death-worlders from a planet that tried to kill them every day. They evolved for war. Every instinct honed for violence." Ambassador Lee's face remained neutral, but Min-jun saw her hands clench slightly. "Counselor Zekthor, evolution does not determine destiny. Yes, Earth was dangerous. Yes, our ancestors fought to survive, but we have grown beyond our violent past. We seek only peaceful cooperation. Then you will have no problem complying with our protective measures," Zekthor interrupted. Behind him, a holographic display appeared, showing what looked like a legal document. "The Council has decided, for the safety of all galactic civilization, that humanity must be placed under protective oversight." Min-jun's blood went cold as he read the terms appearing on his personal datapad. "Earth will surrender 70% of all military vessels to Council command within 30 days, Zekthor continued. "All human colony worlds will accept Council peacekeeping forces. All weapon production will be monitored and approved by Council inspectors. Human ships will be limited to specific travel corridors. These measures are non-negotiable." The chamber erupted in noise. Some species voiced support. Others seemed uncertain. The tree-like counselor spoke urgently with her neighbors. Ambassador Lee stood frozen for a moment. Then she found her voice. "Counselor, these terms would effectively end human sovereignty. We would become a supervised species, stripped of our right to self-defense. No independent species in this council has been asked to accept such conditions. No other species requires such measures." Zekthor's eyes gleamed with something that looked like satisfaction. "You are dangerous, unpredictable. You must be controlled before you become a threat to civilized space." "And if we refuse?" Ambassador Lee asked quietly. "Then the Council will have no choice but to take corrective action, for the greater good." Zekthor's mandibles spread in what might have been a smile. 30 days, Ambassador. Choose wisely." The speaker's voice rang out. This session is concluded. The human delegation may depart. Min-jun followed Ambassador Lee from the chamber. Neither spoke until they reached their transport ship. Director Ji-woo Kim was waiting for them, having watched the proceedings from orbit. Her face was grim. "They're serious," Ji-woo said as they sealed the airlock. "I've been monitoring Council military movements. They're positioning fleets near our space. They think we'll surrender," Min-jun spoke for the first time. "They think we're too weak to resist." Ambassador Lee sat heavily in a chair. She looked tired, old. "We have 300 ships. The Council commands over 10,000. They have technology centuries ahead of ours. What choice do we have?" "We have the choice every human has faced when threatened," Min-jun said. "Fight or submit. Fighting means death for millions, maybe billions. Submitting means death for who we are." Min-jun pulled up a star chart. "They call us violent, dangerous. Maybe they're right to fear what we are. Maybe they should have left us alone." Ji-woo looked at him sharply. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we show them exactly why they were right to fear us." The journey back to Earth took 3 days. During that time, messages flew between Earth and its colonies. By the time their ship entered Earth's atmosphere, the decision had already been made. Every nation, every government, every military force had voted unanimously. Min-jun stood in the command center deep beneath Earth Defense Force headquarters. Admiral Seo Yun-choi addressed the gathered military leaders via hologram from orbit. "The Council expects surrender. They expect us to bow our heads and accept chains. Every species in galactic space has done exactly that when the Council demanded it." She paused, looking at each face. "But we are not like every other species. Our ancestors faced ice ages and plagues, predators and famine, disasters that would have ended softer species, and we survived, not by submitting, not by accepting defeat, but by fighting back with everything we had." Admiral Choi's expression hardened. "If the Council wants war, we'll give them war. Not the kind they're used to. Not the polite, limited conflicts they're familiar with. They'll get the kind of war that only a Death World species knows how to fight. They'll get total war." Min-jun felt something settle in his chest. Not fear, not anger, certainty. "Send the message," Admiral Choi ordered. Ambassador Lee's face appeared on every screen in the room. She looked different now, harder. She spoke clearly for the official recording that would be transmitted to the Galactic Council. "To the esteemed members of the Galactic Council, Earth has reviewed your ultimatum. Our answer is no. We will not surrender our freedom. We will not accept chains. We will not submit." She leaned closer to the camera. "If you want to control us, you'll have to break us first. And we don't break easily." The message was sent across faster-than-light communication networks. It reached the Council within hours. In his command ship orbiting the Council homeworld, Zekthor read the response. His mandibles clicked rapidly in what his species expressed as amusement. "Foolish primitives," he said to his assembled fleet commanders. "They choose extinction. Very well. Prepare the disciplinary fleet. 500 ships should be more than sufficient to teach these humans their place. We'll start with their colony worlds. Burn a few to ash. The rest will surrender quickly enough." His officers saluted and departed to prepare the fleet. Zekthor looked at the star map showing Earth's location. Such a small, insignificant world, such a young, arrogant species. They would learn. They all learned eventually. He had no idea that everything he thought he knew about war was about to be proven catastrophically wrong. The disciplinary fleet gathered at the edge of Council space like a swarm of metal locusts, 500 warships, each one larger and more powerful than anything Earth had ever built. Counselor Zekthor stood on the command deck of his flagship, watching the formation come together with satisfaction. "All ships report ready, Commander," his tactical officer reported. "Excellent. What is our first target?" The human colony of New Sol. Population 43,000. Light defensive installations. They should surrender immediately once they see our force. Zekthor's mandibles clicked softly. And if they don't surrender? Then we demonstrate the price of defiance. The tactical officer pulled up images of the planet. A small world, recently terraformed, covered in farms and small settlements. Orbital bombardment will eliminate all surface structures within hours, a clear message to the other colonies. Back on Earth, the command center was chaos. Screens showed data streaming in from hundreds of sources. Admiral Seo Yoon Choi stood at the center, impossibly calm despite the storm around her. Confirmed, an analyst reported. Council fleet entering Sector 7, 500 ships. They're heading directly for New Sol. Just as we predicted, Admiral Choi said. She looked at Dr. Young-Ho Kang, a thin man with gray hair who had spent 40 years studying military history. Doctor? The Council fights wars the way they negotiate, Dr. Kang said, pulling up historical records. Overwhelming force, public displays of power. They expect their enemies to see the size of their fleet and surrender immediately. It works because every species they've encountered thinks the same way they do. But we don't, Captain Minjun Park said, checking his gear. No, Dr. Kang smiled grimly. We have 5,000 years of experience fighting when we're outnumbered. We learned long ago that the bigger they are, the harder they fall. We just need to trip them properly. Admiral Choi activated the fleet-wide channel. All ships, execute Operation Hornet's Nest. Show them what humans do best. At New Sol, evacuation transports were already lifting off. They had started the moment Earth sent its refusal to the Council. Every civilian, every child, every non-essential person was being moved to hidden facilities in the outer system. The farms and buildings were empty shells now, waiting. Commander Jae-Sung Ryu sat in the cockpit of his fighter, one of 300 small craft hidden in the asteroid field surrounding New Sol. His craft was tiny compared to Council warships. Fast, agile, armed with missiles and railguns. Not much, but enough. Council fleet dropping out of FTL, his sensor officer reported. They're forming up in high orbit. Energy signatures indicate they're charging weapons. Let them get comfortable, Jae-Sung said calmly. Wait for it. On Zekthor's flagship, tactical displays showed New Sol below them. Silent. No defense fleet came to meet them. No communication begging for mercy. Strange, Zekthor said. Scan for life signs. Commander, I'm reading almost nothing. Perhaps a few hundred signatures. The colony should have over 40,000. They evacuated. Zekthor felt a flicker of unease. Why evacuate if they plan to surrender? Sir, detecting movement in the asteroid field. Multiple small craft appearing on sensors. Hundreds of them. They're spreading out around us. Fighters? Zekthor laughed. They send fighters against battleships? Destroy them. That's when New Sol's surface opened up. What looked like farms and warehouses suddenly split apart. Hidden beneath were weapons platforms, missile batteries, and railgun emplacements. They had been there all along, disguised, waiting. Thousands of missiles launched simultaneously. They weren't guided by advanced AI like Council weapons. They were simple, chemical-driven rockets with explosive warheads. Primitive by galactic standards. But there were so many of them, filling space like a metal storm. Evasive action! Zekthor shouted, but his ships were too large, too slow. The first wave of missiles hit the outer ships of his formation. Explosions blossomed across hulls. Council shields flared and held, but the sheer number of impacts overwhelmed targeting computers. Then the asteroids started moving. They weren't asteroids. They were hollowed-out rocks packed with explosives and simple thrusters. Humans called them poor man's torpedoes. The Council had never seen anything like them. Jae-Sung watched a space rock the size of a building slam into a Council battleship's side. The explosion cracked the hull open like an egg. All fighters attack Pattern Delta, hit their engines and sensor arrays. Make them blind and deaf. His fighter squadron screamed into the chaos. Council Point Defense tried to track them, but the small craft moved too fast, too erratically. They wove through debris and explosions, firing railgun slugs at specific weak points. "This is insane!" Zekthor's pilot shouted. "They're everywhere! I can't get a lock!" Another battleship exploded as a hidden mine network activated. Mines that had been floating dormant in space, looking like debris until Council ships came close enough. "Retreat!" Zekthor ordered. "Pull back to safe distance!" But pulling back meant breaking formation. Ships scattered, each captain trying to save their own vessel. That's when Minjun's teams struck. His boarding craft were modified cargo haulers, fast and hard to detect. They latched onto Council supply ships in the confusion. Breaching charges blew holes through hulls. Minjun led his team through, wearing combat armor and carrying weapons designed for one thing: close quarters fighting. The Council species were not prepared for this. Most galactic wars were fought at range, ship to ship. Boarding actions were considered barbaric, primitive. But humans had been fighting hand-to-hand for millennia. Minjun's team moved through the ship's corridors with brutal efficiency. Council crew members, unused to violence, panicked and fled. Those who tried to fight discovered that humans were stronger, faster, and far more aggressive than they expected. "Supply ship secured," Minjun reported. "Crew has surrendered. They're terrified." "Good," Admiral Choi's voice came through his comm. "Let them stay terrified. Let them tell their friends what happened here." In space around New Sol, the Council fleet was in chaos. 50 ships destroyed, dozens more damaged. Fighters still swarmed around them like angry insects. The planet's surface continued launching missiles. Zekthor finally got his fleet beyond weapons range. He stared at the tactical display in disbelief. 50 ships, 50 of his finest warships, destroyed by primitives using obsolete weapons and insane tactics. "Get me a communication link to the Council," he ordered. His voice shook with rage. "I need reinforcements. 500 ships is not enough. I want 5,000. I want enough firepower to turn Earth itself into rubble." "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the humans." "Put it through." Captain Park's face appeared on the screen. He was still in his combat armor, covered in scorch marks and debris. Behind him, Council prisoners sat with their hands bound. "Commander Zekthor," Minjun said pleasantly. "That was just one colony. We have 73 more. If you want them, come and take them. We'll be waiting." The transmission cut off. Zekthor's mandibles ground together so hard they sparked. "Prepare all ships. We advance toward Earth itself. I will personally oversee the destruction of their homeworld." His officers exchanged worried glances but said nothing. They had all seen what happened at New Sol. They had all felt the fear when human fighters appeared out of nowhere, when asteroids became weapons, when every assumption about warfare proved wrong. But Zekthor was beyond reason now. He wanted revenge. He wanted to prove Council superiority. He wanted to make humanity pay for humiliating him. On Earth, Dr. Kang watched the Council fleet begin moving toward human space. He smiled sadly. They still don't understand. They think this was us fighting. They haven't seen anything yet. Admiral Choi nodded. "Let them come. Every light year they travel will teach them another lesson. By the time they reach Earth, they'll understand what it means to provoke a species born in fire." She activated the fleet-wide channel again. "All ships, begin Operation Rolling Thunder. Make them bleed for every inch of space. Make them regret every decision that brought them here." Across human space, hundreds of ships began moving into position. Mines were laid, traps were set, ambush points were prepared. The Council was about to learn that humans didn't just know how to fight. They knew how to make their enemies wish they had never started the fight at all. Councilor Zekthor's fleet moved through space like an armored fist. 450 ships remained after the disaster at New Sol. He had called it a minor setback, a surprise that would not work twice. Now they advanced carefully, sensors at maximum range, weapons ready for any trick the humans might attempt. Approaching the asteroid belt designated Sector 12, his navigator reported. No human ships detected. "They're hiding," Zekthor said, "waiting to ambush. All ships, maintain formation. Heavy ships forward. If they attack, we crush them with overwhelming firepower." What Zekthor didn't know was that Admiral Choi had no intention of fighting where he expected. 3 light-years away, Captain Min-Jun Park floated in the cargo bay of a stealth transport. Around him, 50 other soldiers checked their gear in silence. They wore black armor designed to absorb sensor scans. Their weapons were simple, but deadly. Kinetic rifles, explosive charges, combat knives. "Approaching Council supply convoy," the pilot announced. 20 cargo ships, 10 escort vessels. They're hauling ammunition and fuel to the main fleet. Min-Jun smiled. "In traditional warfare, you attacked the enemy's army. In human warfare, you attacked everything that kept the army moving." "All teams ready?" he asked. Affirmative responses came through his helmet comm. "Then let's go hunting." The stealth transport released dozens of small boarding pods. They drifted through space silently, looking like debris until they latched onto the convoy ships. Cutting torches began burning through hulls. Inside the Council cargo ship, crew members were relaxed. They were far behind the battle lines, safe from combat. When alarms suddenly blared, they didn't understand what was happening. Then armored humans poured through breached sections. The fighting was brief and brutal. Council crew members were technicians and cargo handlers, not soldiers. They surrendered quickly when faced with humans who moved with terrifying efficiency. Min-Jun's team secured the ship in under 10 minutes. "Plant the charges," he ordered. "Set timers for 1 hour. That gives us time to clear out and them time to evacuate." "Sir, why let them evacuate?" a young soldier asked. "Because we're not monsters," Min-Jun said. "We destroy their supplies, not their people. Unless they make us." They moved through the convoy systematically. Every cargo ship was boarded, every crew captured or sent to escape pods, every valuable supply rigged to explode. When they finished, the convoy was a string of ticking time bombs. Min-Jun's transport jumped away just before the first explosions began. 20 ships full of ammunition and fuel detonated in a chain reaction that lit up sensors across 3 star systems. Zekthor received the report with disbelief. "They destroyed the supply convoy? How? It was nowhere near the battle zone." "Sir, multiple reports coming in. Human teams are attacking logistics stations, fuel depots, repair facilities. Small units, striking fast and disappearing. We can't predict where they'll hit next." "This is not warfare." Zekthor slammed his armored fist against his command console. "This is terrorism." In Earth's command center, Dr. Kang heard that comment when they intercepted Council communications. He laughed bitterly. "Terrorism? No, Commander. This is asymmetric warfare. When you can't match the enemy's strength, you attack their weaknesses. Humans wrote the book on this 5,000 years ago." Meanwhile, Commander Jae-Sung Ryu was writing new chapters. His fighter squadron was built for speed and maneuverability, not direct combat. Council warships were armored fortresses that could take incredible punishment, so Jae-Sung didn't attack the ships themselves. He attacked their ability to fight. "Target their sensor arrays," he ordered his squadron. "Blind them first." 20 fighters screamed past a Council battleship at speeds that made targeting nearly impossible. Each one fired electromagnetic pulse missiles at the sensor clusters dotting the ship's hull. The missiles weren't powerful enough to destroy the ship, but they didn't need to be. The battleship's sensors went dark. Blind and confused, it couldn't coordinate with the rest of the fleet. It couldn't track incoming threats. It was a floating target. "Now their communications," Jae-Sung said. Another pass, another volley of missiles. The battleship's communication arrays exploded in sparks. Now it couldn't even call for help. And now, Jae-sung smiled coldly, we introduce them to the asteroid field. His fighters began herding the blind, deaf battleship. Small impacts from railguns, missile warnings on systems that were barely functioning. The battleship's captain, panicking, ordered full thrust. They fled directly into a dense asteroid cluster. Without sensors, they couldn't see the collision coming until it was too late. The battleship slammed into a rock the size of a mountain. The impact cracked the hull open. Atmosphere vented into space. The ship tumbled, broken and helpless. Survivors detected, Jae-sung's sensor operator reported. Escape pods launching. Mark their location and send coordinates to rescue, Jae-sung ordered. We're soldiers, not murderers. This pattern repeated across the battlefield. Human fighters didn't destroy council ships with superior firepower. They crippled them with precision strikes. They divided the fleet, isolated ships, and used the environment itself as a weapon. Then came the EMP mines. Council ships relied heavily on artificial intelligence for everything from navigation to weapons targeting. Their computer systems were advanced but fragile. Human ships had learned to operate with manual backups after Earth's own wars taught them the danger of depending too much on electronics. When the Council fleet entered what looked like empty space, they triggered mines that released electromagnetic pulses. The energy washed over their ships, frying circuits and crashing computer systems. Half the fleet went dark simultaneously. Life support remained active, but weapons, shields, engines, and sensors all failed at once. The ships drifted helplessly, while crews scrambled to restart systems. That's when the human fleet struck. Admiral Choi had held her main battle fleet in reserve, waiting for this moment. 300 human warships dropped out of FTL directly on top of the disabled Council vessels. All ships, fire at will, she ordered. Human weapons might have been less advanced, but they worked. Railguns fired slugs of metal at fractions of light speed. Missile tubes launched volley after volley. Nuclear warheads detonated against Council hulls. The disabled ships couldn't return fire, couldn't raise shields, couldn't maneuver. They were helpless. "This is slaughter," Zekthor's second-in-command protested. "We must retreat." "No!" Zekthor's voice cracked with rage and desperation. "We advance! All functional ships, protect the disabled vessels and push forward! We are the Galactic Council! We do not flee from primitives!" But his officers had seen enough. They had watched 50 ships destroyed at New Seoul, watched supply lines burn, watched their technology turned into a liability, watched humans fight with a viciousness and creativity that terrified them. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission. It's marked Priority Alpha. From Earth." "I don't want to hear their surrender offer," Zekthor growled. "Sir, I don't think it's a surrender." The screen activated. Instead of military personnel, it showed regular humans. Scientists, artists, teachers, children. A montage of Earth life, peaceful and vibrant. Then it shifted to show human history. Wars, yes. Violence, certainly. But also cooperation, sacrifice, courage in the face of impossible odds. A voice spoke over the images. It was Admiral Choi. "Counselor Zekthor, you called us violent. You called us primitive. You said we were dangerous. You were right about all of it. But you made one critical mistake. You assumed that because we can be violent, we want to be. You assumed that because we survived by fighting, we haven't learned when to stop." The transmission showed footage from the battles. Council crew members being sent to escape pods by human soldiers. Survivors being given medical aid. Prisoners being treated with respect. "We could have killed everyone," Admiral Choi continued. "We could have turned your fleet into debris. We chose not to. But make no mistake, Commander. We chose. This is mercy, not weakness. And mercy has limits." The image changed to show human ships in attack formation, weapons hot, surrounding what remained of the Council fleet. You have one chance to end this. Pull back. Take your ships and go home, or we stop holding back and show you what we're really capable of. Choose now. The transmission ended. Zekthor stared at the screen. Around him, his bridge crew waited in silence. Outside his ship, the human fleet waited with weapons charged. For the first time since this war began, Counselor Zekthor felt something he had never experienced in 200 years of military service. He felt fear, not of losing, not of death, but fear of what humans might become if pushed too far. Fear that he had provoked something that should have been left alone. Fear that he had awakened a sleeping predator that had been trying very hard to stay peaceful. "Sir," his tactical officer whispered, "your orders?" Zekthor's mandibles clicked slowly as he watched human ships on his sensors. So many of them now. When had they become so many? How had primitives with inferior technology brought his mighty fleet to the edge of destruction? The answer was simple and terrifying. They hadn't won with technology. They'd won with something the Council had forgotten centuries ago. The will to fight with everything they had. The refusal to give up. The desperate courage of species that had clawed their way up from the bottom. "Send a message to the Council headquarters," Zekthor said, his voice hollow. "Tell them we need reinforcements. Tell them we need thousands of ships. Tell them—" He paused. "Tell them we made a terrible mistake." The message from Zekthor's fleet reached every corner of galactic space. Not the official request for reinforcements, but the truth. Battle footage, casualty reports, and recordings of human tactics had been leaked by horrified Council crew members. Within days, every species in the galaxy knew what was happening. In the chambers of the Galactic Council, emergency sessions ran continuously. Representatives argued, shouted, and demanded answers. Elder Mirazin, a member of the peaceful Ventari species, stood before the assembly with her 3 arms raised for silence. "We must speak truth," her melodic voice carried through the chamber. "The humans were provoked without cause. We demanded they surrender their sovereignty based on fear and prejudice. Now we reap what we have sown." "They have destroyed over 200 council ships," another representative shouted. "They must be stopped." 200 ships sent to threaten their homes and families, Mirazin countered. "What did we expect? That they would simply bow their heads and accept chains? Would your species?" Silence fell, because the answer was obvious. Most species in the Council had joined not through conquest, but through intimidation. They had surrendered without fighting because they saw Council might and chose survival over freedom. But they all remembered the bitter taste of that choice. "The Naro people watch with interest," said Representative Kess, speaking for a species that had endured centuries of harsh Council regulations. "If humans can resist, perhaps we were too quick to submit." Alarmed murmurs spread through the chamber. This was dangerous talk. If other species began to question Council authority, the entire structure of galactic governance could collapse. Meanwhile, aboard Council ships throughout the galaxy, crew members quietly discussed what they had seen. Human tactics had been brutal but not cruel, effective but not sadistic. Every action calculated to disable rather than destroy when possible. "They gave us warning before boarding," one Council soldier told another. "Said surrender, and we wouldn't be harmed. When we surrendered, they actually kept their word, fed us, gave medical treatment, then sent us home. I heard they could have destroyed the whole fleet at Sector 12. Instead, they offered terms. Who does that when they're winning?" Species that remember being afraid, that understand what it means to fight for survival. These conversations spread, and with them, something unexpected began to grow. Not hatred of the humans, respect. On Earth, Ambassador Hyejin Lee worked frantically through channels most people didn't know existed, secret communications with peaceful council members, back-channel negotiations with neutral species, building coalitions among those who questioned the wisdom of this war. The Talori Confederation has agreed to abstain from military support, she reported to Admiral Choi. The Ventari are actively speaking against the war. The Naro are on the edge of supporting us openly. Will it be enough? Admiral Choi asked. I don't know. Zekthor is pushing for total mobilization. Thousands of ships. He wants to end this with overwhelming force. Then we need to move faster. We can't let him gather that army. Admiral Choi looked at the star charts showing council shipyards, supply depots, and staging areas. In traditional warfare, you waited for the enemy to come to you. But humans had learned long ago that the best defense was a good offense. Captain Park, she activated the comm. It's time. Execute Operation Firestorm. Min-Jun Park had been waiting for this order. His teams were already in position, scattered across council space in stealth ships. They carried something that would change the nature of this war completely. Information. Remember, Min-Jun told his assembled teams via encrypted channel. We're not attacking. We're revealing. Every war crime, every abuse of power, every lie the Council has told. Make sure every species in the galaxy sees the truth. Human hackers, the best Earth had ever produced, launched their assault. Not on military networks, but on civilian ones. Council propaganda channels suddenly displayed images they tried to hide. News networks showed footage of Council forces destroying peaceful colonies of species who had resisted too strongly. Historical records revealed how many civilizations had been crushed or enslaved over the centuries. On the Naro homeworld, citizens watched in horror as they learned the truth about their own history. The Council hadn't offered protection. They had demanded surrender under threat of extinction. On Ventari, Elder Mirasin watched the revelations with tears in her 3 eyes. Her people had believed the Council's promise of peace and prosperity. They had never known the cost others paid. But the most devastating leak came from Zekthor's own archives. Personal communications revealing that the attack on Earth had been planned months before humans ever provoked anything. They had been looking for an excuse to control humanity, to stop them before they could become powerful enough to challenge Council authority. The galaxy erupted in outrage. It was planned, representatives shouted in the Council chamber. They manufactured a crisis to justify aggression. Zekthor tried to control the damage. Those communications are fabricated, human propaganda. But it was too late. The truth was out, and it spread faster than any fleet could travel. While galactic civilization fractured, Admiral Choi prepared her next move. She had held Earth's main military power in reserve. Now it was time to take the offensive. All deep strike teams, begin operations, she ordered. Human ships jumped to Council shipyards, not the ones near homeworlds where civilians could be hurt, but military construction facilities in deep space. They dropped out of FTL, launched electromagnetic pulse missiles, and disabled the yards before a single ship could respond. Set demolition charges on incomplete warships only, Min-Jun ordered his boarding teams. Nothing that could spread debris toward inhabited areas. We destroy their capacity to make war, not their people. Across Council space, dozens of military facilities went offline, not destroyed, but crippled. Reprogrammed fabrication systems to build civilian equipment instead of weapons. Disabled, but left intact enough to be repaired for peaceful purposes. Commander Jae-Sung Ryu led fighter squadrons deep into Council territory, hitting supply convoys and resource stations. Every attack was precise, every target military. Human pilots went out of their way to avoid civilian casualties. Why? One of Jae-Sung's pilots asked. They wanted to destroy us. Why do we show mercy? Because, Jae-Sung replied, when this is over we have to live in the same galaxy. Because we're proving we're not the monsters they claimed, and because that's what separates us from them. Back in the Council chamber, the government was collapsing. Elder Mirasin had gathered enough support to force a vote. Remove Zekthor from command and open peace negotiations, or face mass defection of member species. "You would surrender to primitives?" Zekthor raged. "You would let them dictate terms to the council?" "No," Mirasin said calmly. "We would acknowledge that we were wrong, that we attacked an innocent species without cause, that we must face the consequences of our actions." The vote was called. It was not unanimous, but it was clear. Zekthor was removed from military command. An emergency peace delegation was authorized. Zekthor watched his career, his authority, everything he had built over 2 centuries crumble in moments. But worse than personal loss was the realization slowly spreading through his mind. He had been wrong about humans, about their nature, about everything. They weren't mindless, aggressive primitives. They were survivors who had learned when to fight and when to show mercy. They weren't dangerous because they loved violence. They were dangerous because they understood it so well that they knew exactly how to control it. In his private quarters, Zekthor reviewed the battle footage again, not looking for tactical errors, looking for the truth he had refused to see. Humans sending council crew to escape pods before destroying ships. Humans offering surrender terms before attacking. Humans targeting military assets while avoiding civilian casualties even when it made combat more difficult. Every action of a species that had evolved past its violent history. That had grown up. That had become more than its origins. He had called them primitive, but they had shown more wisdom than the council had in centuries. A message appeared on his personal screen. From Earth. From Admiral Choi herself. "Counselor Zekthor, your government has removed you from command. They are sending a peace delegation. We will meet them, but I wanted to tell you something directly." Admiral Choi's face was hard, but not hateful. "You made a mistake, a terrible one. But you have a choice now. Accept that you were wrong and work to make things right, or cling to pride and make everything worse. I hope you're smart enough to choose wisely." The message ended. Zekthor sat in silence for a long time. Outside his window, stars moved slowly past. The same stars humans looked at from Earth, the same galaxy they all shared. He had tried to cage them, to control them, to break them before they could become powerful. Instead, they had broken his fleet, his career, and his certainty that the council was always right. And somehow, despite everything, they were offering him a chance to do better. Zekthor made his decision. He began composing his own message, not to Admiral Choi, to the council, a full confession, an acknowledgement of his mistakes, and a recommendation: make peace. Not because humans had won, but because they had earned something more valuable than victory. They had earned respect. The peace delegation arrived at a neutral station 3 weeks after Zekthor's removal from command. Elder Mirazin led the council representatives, her 3 arms carrying symbols of truce from a dozen species. Behind her came diplomats, military advisors, and observers from nearly every member civilization. On the other side of the docking bay, Ambassador Hyejin Lee stood waiting. Behind her, Admiral Seo Yun Choi in full-dress uniform. Captain Minjun Park stood at attention, his combat decorations gleaming. Commander Jae-sung Ryu represented the fighter corps, and Director Ji-woo Kim came as witness to everything that had brought them to this moment. The 2 groups met in the center of the station's grand hall. No weapons, no guards, just people trying to find a way forward. "On behalf of the Galactic Council," Elder Mirasin began, her voice heavy with emotion, "I offer apology. We acted on fear and prejudice. We threatened your people without cause. We provoked a war that should never have happened. For this, we are deeply sorry." Ambassador Lee nodded slowly. "Your apology is heard, but apologies alone do not repair the damage. Over 400 council crew members died in this conflict. 23 human soldiers gave their lives defending our freedom. Thousands more were injured. Property was destroyed. Trust was shattered. Yes, Mirasin agreed, and we must face those consequences. But I must tell you something that you may not know. Something that has happened across the galaxy while we fought. She activated a holographic display. It showed dozens of species, their representatives speaking in their own languages, united by a single message. If the Council could be wrong about humanity, what else might they be wrong about? If humans could resist, why did we surrender so easily? The recordings showed protests on Council worlds, demands for reform, species that had lived under harsh regulations for centuries suddenly finding their voices. You did more than defend yourselves, Mirasin continued. You reminded the galaxy that freedom is worth fighting for, that authority must be earned, not demanded, that even the powerful can be wrong. Admiral Choi stepped forward. Then perhaps something good can come from this tragedy, but we need more than words. We need guarantees. The negotiations lasted 3 days. Neither side gave in easily, but both sides were willing to listen. The final treaty was unlike anything in Council history. Earth would not surrender its military, would not accept oversight, would not be treated as a probationary member or supervised species. Instead, humanity would join the Galactic Council as a full, independent, equal member, with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities that came with that status. The Council would acknowledge their aggression as unjust, would pay reparations for the war they started, would reform their military doctrine to prevent future abuses of power, and humanity would provide something unexpected: military advisors, tactical instructors, teachers who would share the lessons learned from thousands of years of human warfare. You want us to teach you how to fight? Minjun asked in disbelief when he heard this proposal. No, a Council military commander said quietly. We want you to teach us how to fight smart, how to win without destroying everything, how to be strong without being cruel. Your species has learned these lessons. We need to learn them too. The treaty was signed in the same chamber where Zekthor had first issued his ultimatum, but this time humans sat at the table as equals. There is one more matter, Elder Mirazin said as the ceremony concluded. Counselor Zekthor has requested to speak with your delegation. You are under no obligation to meet with him. Ambassador Lee looked at her team. Admiral Choi nodded slightly. Captain Park shrugged. Let him speak. Zekthor entered the room alone. He wore no armor, no symbols of rank. His mandibles were lowered in a gesture of submission. He looked smaller somehow, older. I came to apologize personally, he said, to admit that I was wrong about everything, about your nature, about the threat you posed, about what it means to be strong. He stood before them, this being who had commanded fleets and issued orders that moved worlds. I saw your history of war and assumed you loved violence. I saw your weapons and assumed you only understood force. I saw your expansion and assumed you sought domination. And now? Admiral Choi asked. Now I see that you are what we should have become. Species that understand violence so well that you know when not to use it, that are strong enough to show mercy, that fight when necessary but always remember the cost. Zekthor's voice grew quieter. I lost 400 crew members because of my arrogance. They died because I refused to see the truth. That burden is mine to carry, but I wanted you to know you were right to resist, right to fight back, right to teach us this lesson. Captain Park stepped forward. My grandfather taught me something when I was young. He said the strongest person is not the one who never loses. It's the one who learns from losing and becomes better. He extended his hand, a human gesture of respect. You learned. That takes courage, too. Zekthor looked at the offered hand for a long moment. Then he reached out with one of his forearms and grasped it. Perhaps, he said softly, there is hope for us all. 3 years later, the changes were visible throughout the galaxy. Captain Min-Jun Park stood in a training facility on a Council military station. Around him, soldiers from 20 different species practiced close-quarters combat techniques. Not because they expected to board enemy ships, but because the training taught discipline, courage, and respect for the reality of violence. Remember, Min-Jun told his students, every technique I teach you should make you less likely to fight, not more. When you truly understand how to hurt someone, you understand why you shouldn't, unless absolutely necessary. A young Ventari soldier raised one of her 3 arms. Teacher Park, is it true that humans fought wars among themselves for thousands of years? Yes, Min-Jun said. How did you stop? We didn't, not completely. We still have conflicts, arguments, disagreements. But we learned that most problems have better solutions than violence. We learned to talk first, fight last, and when we do fight, fight to end the conflict, not to destroy the enemy. Commander Jae-Sung Ryu was doing similar work with fighter pilots, teaching them that speed and skill mattered more than raw power, that thinking creatively could defeat superior technology, that the best victory was the one that cost the fewest lives on both sides. Admiral Choi had been appointed as a special military advisor to the Council. She worked on reforming their entire approach to conflict resolution, building systems that prevented wars instead of just fighting them. And Ambassador Lee, now Earth's permanent Council representative, worked tirelessly to ensure that no species would ever face what humanity had faced. That aggression would be challenged, that fear would not become policy, that every voice would be heard. The Council itself had changed. New regulations prevented any single member from wielding too much power. Military actions required broader approval. Member species had more autonomy and protection. It wasn't perfect. Old prejudices didn't disappear overnight. Some species still viewed humans with suspicion or fear. Some resented the changes humans had forced upon the Council. But most recognized the truth. Humanity hadn't conquered the Council. They had saved it from itself. On Earth, life had returned to normal in many ways, but the people who had lived through the war carried its lessons forward. They had learned that peace was precious, but not guaranteed, that freedom required vigilance. That strength without wisdom was just tyranny waiting to happen. Director Ji-Woo Kim retired from military service and became a teacher. She taught history, focusing on conflicts throughout human history and what they had learned from each one. We are not naturally peaceful, she told her students. We are naturally survivors. But survival taught us that cooperation works better than conquest, that building is more valuable than destroying, that the strongest societies are the ones where everyone has value. A student raised his hand. Teacher Kim, some people say we should have destroyed the Council fleet completely, that we were too merciful, that they might threaten us again. They might, Ji-Woo agreed. That's always a risk with mercy, but destroying them would have made us the monsters they accused us of being. It would have proven them right about us. We chose a harder path. We chose to prove them wrong. She pulled up an image on the classroom display. Humans and aliens working together on Council stations, ships from a dozen species training in joint exercises, scientists collaborating on projects that benefited everyone. This is what we won, she said. Not domination, not control, but respect, partnership, a place at the table as equals, and the knowledge that when we're pushed, we can push back. But we don't have to become the things we fight against. On the Council station where it had all begun, a memorial had been erected. Names of the dead, both human and Council, were carved in stone from Earth, a reminder of the cost of prejudice and the price of pride. Ambassador Lee stood before it sometimes, reading the names, remembering faces, honoring sacrifices. Captain Park found her there one evening. Still thinking about the war? He asked. Always, she said. We won, but people died. That's not something to celebrate. No, he agreed, but it's something to remember. So we don't forget why we fight. And more importantly, why we stop fighting. They stood together in silence for a moment. Then Lee smiled slightly. Elder Mirazin told me something yesterday. More species are asking for human advisors. Military training, diplomatic consultation, conflict resolution. We're becoming the ones everyone turns to when they need help. That's a big responsibility, Park said. Yes. But maybe that's how we prove the Council was wrong about us. Not by being peaceful, not by being harmless, but by being strong enough to help others. Wise enough to know when to fight and when to talk. Brave enough to show mercy even when we could choose vengeance. Park nodded. My grandfather would have liked that. He always said the true measure of a person is not what they do when they're weak, it's what they do when they're strong. And we're strong now, Lee said. The question is what we do with that strength. The answer, they both knew, would define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. Far across space, on dozens of worlds, humans worked alongside aliens, building, teaching, learning, growing, not conquerors, not overlords, partners. The Council had provoked Earth expecting submission. They had received defiance. They had attacked expecting quick victory. They had received devastating defeat. But most importantly, they had expected monsters and found something far more frightening. They found people who were willing to fight with everything they had, but still chose mercy when they won. People who understood violence so deeply that they knew exactly when not to use it. People who had earned, through blood and sacrifice and impossible odds, something that could never be demanded or taken by force. They had earned respect, and with it, they had changed the galaxy forever.